In our news tonight, the keys to a fleet of 52 buses were handed to the Ministry of Education as part of Royal Court initiatives to revamp the education sector. Iraqi forces free an 11-year-old Yazidi girl who was kidnapped from the village of Kosho in Sinjar and sold as a slave by Daesh in 2014. And protests in several capitals across the world on Earth Day in support of science as part of the Global March for Science initiative. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. The keys to a fleet of 52 buses were handed to the Ministry of Education at the ceremony at the Royal Court. 3 more buses were presented to the Jordan Hashemite Charity Organization as part of the Royal Court initiatives. The initiative in support of the education and youth sectors coincides with His Majesty's 7th discussion paper focusing on education and urging stakeholders to adopt a participatory approach to create an environment that promotes students' excellence from KG to secondary levels. Minister of Youth Haditha Khresha, present at the ceremony, said upcoming programs by the ministry will serve to empower youth, maximize their engagement in public life, and enhance their skills and creativity. Also present at the ceremony, Minister of Education Omar Razaz noted His Majesty King Abdullah's interest in revamping education in Jordan to graduate a new generation of skilled individuals capable of contributing to the kingdom's advancement. Separately, Razaz told a conference on education reform that defeating extremism can only be achieved through combating ignorance and spreading knowledge, as well as promoting students' ability to think aloud, be critical, and be self-confident. The minister was addressing the first national conference on education reform, organized in collaboration between the Ministry of Education and the Teachers Association, titled Education in Light of the Skills of the 21st Century. He said the leading role of education through all its components should broadly serve the religious values of moderation and tolerance to overcome the ideologies of extremism and radicalism. The conference included a display of vocational, scientific and technical projects, as well as educational initiatives currently being implemented by schools such as water culture. Moving to Syria, some 120 prisoners who were held by the Syrian government arrived at Al-Rashidin in Aleppo province in Syria as part of a mediated swap deal between the warring sides. The prisoners' release, which came after the evacuation of Syrian civilians and fighters from 4 besieged towns, was completed yesterday after a 48-hour halt, as thousands of civilians and pro-government fighters from the Shiite towns of Al-Fu'a and Kifraya arrived in army-held Aleppo. Rebels reached an agreement yesterday with the government for it to release the first 500 prisoners who would cross into opposition areas as part of the wider deal, and the other 250 prisoners would be released in coming days. According to the chief UN investigator into the attack on Idlib earlier this month, most victims were killed by conventional and not chemical weapons. The chief UN investigator on Syria, Paulo Sergio Pinheiro, was speaking to the press in New York yesterday. Pinheiro chairs the UN Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Syria, investigating the alleged airstrike with sarin gas in Idlib. He told the press that more and more civilians are falling victim to military actions, as all sides of the Syrian conflict are vying for military advantages. While Daesh is losing grounds to the east of Aleppo, other armed groups are striving to grab more grounds, only to expose local civilians to more life-threatening perils. To Iraq, where hundreds fled Mosul today after Iraqi forces retook 2 more districts in the west of the city from Daesh. pushing carts loaded with bags, babies, and the elderly. And after walking for long distances, families were taken by bus from a government checkpoint in the south of the city to camps housing more than 410,000 people displaced since the offensive to retake Mosul began in October. Iraqi forces have taken much of Mosul from the terrorist group, and the military now controls the eastern districts and are making advances in the west. Troops backed by helicopters are making slow progress towards the Al-Nouri Mosque, and according to military officials, they are completing the encirclement of the terrorists in the old city. And in Mosul, Iraqi forces freed an 11-year-old Yazidi girl who was kidnapped and sold as a slave by Daesh in 2014. The child was taken by the terrorists from the village of Kosho, south of Sinjar in northern Iraq, together with her mother and sisters. But yesterday she was freed during an elite counterterrorism operation by security forces in the West Mosul neighborhood of Tanik. Farah Dakhil was only 8 when she was kidnapped and taken to Tel Afar before being sold on to Mosul. Her 2 sisters were sold and sent to Raqqa, but are now in Germany with their mother. When Daesh swept across northern Iraq, it carried out massacres against the minority Yazidis, which qualified by the United Nations as genocide. Around 3,000 Yazidi women are believed to remain in captivity.
ما يقارب 3 سنوات والحمد لله هم استطاعوا أن تحررنا من موصل.
Elsewhere in Iraq, thousands of Shiites converged on a shrine in Baghdad as part of a pilgrimage to commemorate the death of Imam Musa al-Qadim, a great-grandson of Prophet Muhammad who died in the 8th century. Iraqi authorities imposed a vehicle curfew in a number of major streets of the city, while checkpoints were set up in an effort to protect pilgrims walking to the shrine. Last year, an attack on the Shiite pilgrims killed 14 people and wounded more than 30 others. And in Lebanon, a local Daesh leader was killed during a dawn raid by the Lebanese army in the town of Arsal. The army said troops also arrested 10 suspected terrorists who had entered the northeastern border town from Syria. An army statement said the local terrorist leader was involved in attacking military positions and ordered the killing of Lebanese soldiers or kidnapping them during the fighting in Arsal 3 years ago. The other 10 suspects were arrested on charges of smuggling weapons. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani declared a national day of mourning after the deadliest attack ever on a military base in the northern city of Mazar al-Sharif was claimed by Taliban. Ghani ordered that flags be flown at half-mast in memory of the hundreds of troops who died as he arrived at the base today. The group said the attack was in retaliation for recent killings of several Taliban leaders in northern Afghanistan. Some of the attackers used rocket-propelled grenades and rifles, while several others detonated suicide vests packed with explosives. Here are the details.
A deadly attack on an Afghan military base. Taliban attackers dressed in military uniforms talking their way through checkpoints before opening fire. Soldiers were targeted as they ate dinner and left a mosque following Friday prayers. There's conflicting reports on the death toll. Officials saying on Saturday at least 140 soldiers were killed and many others wounded. But a US official earlier put the toll at more than 50 killed and wounded. The Afghan government has yet to release official figures. This man, a nearby resident, says he heard some explosions which sounded like rockets before the fighting began. The Taliban claiming the attack in a statement. Up to 10 of its fighters are believed to have infiltrated the base in the northern city of Mazar-e-Sharif. The major headquarters is often used by foreign military advisors. However, no international troops were involved in Friday's attack. The Western-backed Afghan government has locked in a prolonged war with Taliban insurgents and other militant groups.
French voters are preparing to cast their ballots in one of the country's most crucial and unpredictable elections in decades. French overseas territories and residents in some U.S. states began voting today, and the results will remain sealed until tomorrow evening. In the first round vote under tight security tomorrow, 2 of 11 candidates will be sent into a runoff in 2 weeks' time. Centrist and pro-European Emmanuel Macron is deemed the favorite, while his three close rivals are the anti-EU, anti-immigration National Front leader Marine Le Pen, far-left Jean-Luc Mélenchon, and conservative François Fillon. Polls in the last days of the campaign put all the candidates roughly on between a fifth and a quarter of the vote, with around 5 percentage points or less separating them. However, many voters remain indecisive.
Yes, the elections worry me. There is a certain mood, a campaign which was not exactly the one we were expecting, with some topics that weren't detailed enough, so I think it's quite a shame.
For now, it's really by conviction, really for Macron. Then the problem is that if Mélenchon faces Le Pen in the second round, I will vote blank. It's horrible to come to that, but I can support Mélenchon and his ideas. So for now, it's really a vote by conviction. Useful because there are 4 main candidates and there is the danger of Le Pen and Mélenchon. Anyway, it's a strange election.
U.S. Vice President Mike Pence said the United States would honor a refugee deal with Australia, under which the United States would resettle 1,250 asylum seekers. Speaking at a news conference with the Australian Prime Minister in Sydney, Pence said the U.S. will honor the deal out of respect to its alliance with Australia. Under the deal agreed with former President Barack Obama late last year and described by President Donald Trump as dumb, the U.S. would resettle 1,250 asylum seekers held in offshore processing camps in South Pacific Islands, in Papua New Guinea and Nauru. In return, Australia would resettle refugees from El Salvador, Guatemala and Honduras. On the tension with North Korea, Pence said an aircraft carrier strike group heading for waters off the Korean peninsula would be in the Sea of Japan within days. However, he said because of Trump's new engagement with China, denuclearization of the Korean peninsula can still be achieved peacefully.
We will defend the fundamental freedoms of navigation. Together, our nations will continue to uphold the rules-based system as the foundation of peace and prosperity in the Asia-Pacific. In the South China Sea and throughout the region, we will defend the fundamental freedoms of navigation and overflight, and the United States of America, with Australia, will ensure the unimpeded flow of lawful commerce and promote a peaceful dialogue to address every issue that arises of regional and global concern.
People around the world took to the streets to demonstrate their support for science as part of the Global March for Science initiative coinciding with Earth Day. The protests in support of independent research were initiated by U.S. scientists who were provoked by steep cuts President Donald Trump had proposed for science and research budgets and a growing disregard for evidence-based knowledge. The Washington March would put Trump's questioning of climate change and proposed cuts to federal science programs at center stage. Other protests took place in Germany, England, and Australia, among other countries. In Taipei, Earth Day was marked differently, with hundreds of environment enthusiasts and volunteers participating in a river cleaning activity. Earth Day is held each year on April 22nd to mark the anniversary of the birth of the modern environmental movement of 1970. Food, supplies and experiments weighing more than 3,450 kilograms arrived at the International Space Station aboard an orbital ATK Cygnus capsule. Successfully docked to one of the station's robotic arms, among the capsule's other cargo is a greenhouse the U.S. National Aeronautics and Space Administration is testing to grow food for astronauts on long missions. The Cygnus cargo ship is the 7th of 10 planned missions through 2018 under Orbital Space Station resupply contract with NASA worth up to $3.1 billion. NASA also hired privately owned companies to fly cargo to the station. Russia and Japan also fly cargo ships to the station, a project of 15 nations.
Hopefully the
Are you tired of driving around, exhausted from traffic? Well, for over $1 million, you can soon fly around in a car. Aeromobile unveiled its latest flying car model at the top marquee Monaco Supercar Show. The car is now commercially available, and the Slovakian company says it is ready to take pre-orders for the limited first edition. The latest model can reach a top ground speed of 160 kilometers an hour and airspeed of 360 kilometers an hour. The car can become fully airborne in less than 3 minutes. But to fly the car, you will need a pilot's license. Otherwise, you have to look for a pilot instead of a driver. And tourists from inside and outside Jordan can enjoy a different camping experience in Wadi Ram and Dise. Located in the heart of the Wadi's protected area, luxurious desert dome tents offer visitors a Martian experience to watch stars-painted night skies. The camp contains air-conditioned tents with comfortable beds, toilet and shower facilities. The domes also include a panoramic window for a sweeping view of the Rum Desert. A cozy relaxation area outside the tents offers visitors the Jordanian hospitality experience. 5,000 Bedouins reside in the Wadi Rum Desert, a place they call the Valley of the Moon. Tourists who recently visited were full of praise of their Martian experience in Wadi Rum.
I'm Emanuele from Italy, and we are visiting with the family, the beautiful family Jordan, and we are now in Wadi Rum, in a fantastic place.
Wadi Rum is incredible. The colors I have never seen like this. This place, the luxury camp, is it's like being on Mars, and you can see the stars.
Clay court specialist Albert Ramos Benolas of Spain reached the first Masters final of his career when he beat local favorite Luca Pouille 6-3, 5-7, 6-1 in Monte Carlo. The 15th-seeded left-hander will take on fellow Spaniard Rafa Nadal tomorrow. Pouille was treated by the physiotherapist for lower back pain during the changeover at 3-love in the decider.
Sure. Sad match. Albert Ramos Benolas, 6-3, 5-7, 6-1. 6-3, 5-7, 6-1.
Spain's Jaime Roson beat Vincenzo Nibali to win the Queen stage of the Tour of Croatia. Nibali seemed determined to win as a way of remembering his former teammate Michele Scarponi, who was killed this morning after being hit by a van near his home in Italy. But Roson had a different idea. Nibali sparked the decisive attack on one climb and then made several attacks and responded to others. However, he was unable to get around Roson and followed him across the road. Jan Hurt was third, just behind. Roson now leads Nibali by 2 seconds before tomorrow's final stage to Zagreb. And finally, to the weather forecast. It will be fair tonight in the hilly areas and warm in the Jordan Valley and the Dead Sea, and with southeasterly moderate to brisk winds. Tomorrow, there will be a drastic drop in temperatures with a high of 21 degrees Celsius in Amman. While the Gulf of Aqaba can still enjoy relatively hot spring conditions with northerly moderate to brisk winds and calm seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. A reminder of our top stories before we end the news. The keys to a fleet of 52 buses were handed to the Ministry of Education as part of Royal Court initiatives to revamp the education sector. Iraqi forces free an 11-year-old Yazidi girl who was kidnapped from the village of Kosho in Sinjar and sold as a slave by Daesh in 2014. And protests in several capitals across the world on Earth Day in support of science as part of the Global March for Science initiative. With this, we reach the end of tonight's news. I'm Dana Abu Sham. Thanks for watching and have a good night.